Okay, so the next session is titled Charging Everywhere. So we're going to expand on that conversation. Charging everywhere is the goal. How will the nation's charging providers and utilities create the right kind of charging networks for the demand at work, at home, or for anywhere or anyone on the go? It is my honor to introduce this session's presenter, Giovanni Palazzo, who will also be the roundtable moderator. Giovanni is the president and CEO of Electrify America in Canada and is Veloz's board vice chair. So welcome, Giovanni.
Hello, Josh, Veloz community, and friends. Thanks for having me today. I lost the first portion of the discussion, but today I have the task and the privilege, let's say, to moderate, and I'll try to do my best with my strong Italian accent to do it. We have a nice, great panelist. You'll see the guys here, Mark, Corey, Elise, and Lori, and actually I'm going to present the panelists in 1 second. When we were thinking about with Josh and of course the team here about this panel, we identified two main objectives, and actually they are really structuring the discussion over the last 45 and 50 minutes. As we speak, we have like a twofold approach for the discussion. On one side, trying to identify together current barriers and opportunities that we have to keep on supporting the strong growth that we see in the EV industry as we speak, which is amazing. It's clear for people like me and a lot of in this community sharing pain of pushing electric mobility in the last 20 years. This is where actually the alignment of the planet is happening, right? So we have the industry, the hardware suppliers, the software suppliers, software companies, OEMs, and CPOs, and of course, owner operators of the network. They are ready. And frankly, and I believe that's the great news, customers are buying the cars and are using, in some cases, even, I say it nicely, abusing the networks, which is great, which is exactly what we want to happen. So before we start, let me quickly present the panelists, and I'm asking to Hannah if you could, upload the presentation, if it's possible. Give me a sign, because otherwise I can do it, of course, also quickly from my side.
Go ahead and pull them up, Giovanni, if you have them handy.
Of course I have. Just give me 1 second. So. Tell me when you can see my screen. You should be able to do it anyway. Give me a thumbs up.
Yes, we can see your screen now, Giovanni. All good.
That's great. That's great. Okay. Hey, look, we're going to have a very nice and diversified panel, as promised. We're going to have Mark Pastrone, which is COO of Sema Connect. We have Lori Jamona. She's also very active, of course, in the Veloz community, and she is acting as Senior Vice President, Customer Care for PG&E. Of course, we have Corey Ballas, Senior Public Affairs Specialist at Flow in the US, and Elise Benoit. She's from NLX, and she's head of commercial communication. Before we kick off the discussion, I was really thinking about using the time to table, of course, the topics. And Electrify America is one of the companies who is really doing a lot of efforts to try to increase quality, capability, and density of public charging access to networks and to high power charger dispensers. And Of course, I'm not here to advertise Electrify America, but I have two charts only. And the first one is here uh, to show the courage that we have as we speak. We have, which is the figure you see on the right side, 637 stations as we speak, and we have a clear commitment, which we identified 2 years ago already, to have 800 sites in operation by the end of the year. You may have seen that today, this morning actually, we announced our boost plan. And for the boost plan, we are raising the bar even more because we want to have 1,800 stations in operation by 2025. But most importantly for the discussion today is that if you ask me, hey, Giovanni, in the last 3 years, and I came here and joined Electrify America, we had 0 stations in operation. So we really built out the network in a full fledged in record time, but it was not easy, right? And it was not easy on national level. And frankly, it was not easy, especially in some cases in California. Well, actually, the good news is that this is changing, this is evolving, also thanks to the huge work of a lot of people that you see around Veloz, which is a jewel, which is really having private and public sector working together in a way which is special, and especially coming from Europe, unprecedented, to my knowledge, in the space. So we have CEC, of course, we have utilities, we have CPOs, and we have other important industry players. So again, going back quickly to Electrify America, but this is here already, this chart is not really EA only, right? Because I'm sure, because I know when we shared a couple of Veloz boards together with EVgo, with Jonathan, of course, everyone who is operating in our business at this point of time, it's facing these issues. And I identified 2 of those as we speak. The first one, it's really permitting. Permitting, it's something that has been addressed, is being addressed as we speak. I will talk in 1 minute about it. But I want to share at least, our figures on the permitting side. So you see on the right side, national business days needed to get a permit approved in the US. So 61 business days. So these are business days. And the figures, which is almost, reaching 80 in California. So what does it mean? Of course, you have a higher cost if you want to build charging stations in California, which of course has a direct influence on your financials and also on the station economics going forward, right? And so you have longer duration time, but of course you have higher cost because the most common causes of the delay are mainly what is actually not conceived at the moment from AB 1236, right? So you have a law in California that says that for these reasons, you could not, let's say, have companies attending for permitting, which is zoning review, which is maybe very long, multiple rounds of comment, a lot of comments on also the quality of the comments changing massively from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. Well, actually, the good news, GoBiz, CEC, David in person, the Veloz community has worked together a lot over the last 2 years to change it. And I believe we have a great opportunity very soon. We have the AB 970, hopefully close to final approval at the Senate. And it will be like a game changer, of course, for Electrify America and everyone out there on the permitting side. It will change the scheme. Companies like us have the ability to deploy charging infrastructure over time. So I want to thank this community. I want to thank a lot of people in the line here because I believe all together we are making this happen. The second is energization. And together with permitting, it's a funny time because this is the second component if you consider the value chain and the construction funnel of any charging company. Energization is the second phase where actually you lose control, right? So, this is where you are waiting for the local utility to pop up and to connect your station. So you're done, your station is built. And of course, you need utility to finalize the energization before the station is up and running and serving customers. What is the main issue here in the past? That's been the fact that for sometimes very good and very reasonable reasons, it's difficult for some utilities to really to commit to the scheduling right now. So you may have some rescheduling, you may have some the ability to have maybe two meetings needed for energize and so on. This is changing by having a lot of efforts with working with utilities in California. I think that I have an example here, and Lori can talk about it, but we have been working very well together since the last 2 years with Lori, the team, PG&E, but also with Caroline on San Diego Gas and Electric side, and with Caroline's team, let's say on SCE side. And the good news is that the change, who can make a lot of willingness and can have a strong impact in changing this. It's small. You know, you simply need what we see: dedicated resources, account, and sometimes some schedule meetings about which is the scheduling planning on the long run and on the short run, and then actually the magic happens. So we have seen this in the past, and I believe, and I want to listen, and I want to use this panel also because we have Lori and we have your community here on what we CPOs and the network operators can do, of course, to try to simplify your life going forward. So that was a little bit from my side, as already said, just to table the discussion. But you don't want to listen me only, of course. You want to listen. Give me 1 second because I will quickly stop presenting because I believe you're still. Are you still seeing my screen?
We're all good, Giovanni.
Okay, no, we're fine. So great. Now I want to go back to the panelists, and I want to thank all of you guys for joining me again. So we had Mark, Lori, Corey, and Elise. Can you see me and hear me nicely?
Yes, we can. Loud and clear.
That's great. So I want to thank all of you for being with us once again. Thank you. And I was honored from Veloz and Josh and the team to moderate this. I want to start with Mark. Mark, you have seen, you know, I show a little bit, you know, the Electrify America story, but I believe you may share something very similar, very likely from your side. And I want to kick off with the first question, which is really, tell me a little bit from your side, from SemaConnect side, which was actually the main barrier over the last 2 years and what you are doing actually to try to overcome to those. Thank you, Mark.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Giovanni. Really appreciate the opportunity to be speaking to the Veloz community and joining the panel with Lori, Corey, and Elise. Absolutely. So it's been an exciting 10 years. The industry, as we all know, started 10 years ago and has been in this kind of early adopter phase. And we're right in front of the inflection point of the whole industry. So it's a very exciting time. And now we're all excited about scaling the charging infrastructure. In terms of obstacles, I think there's a few. One I'll focus on for my comments is education. Is in terms of education, this really is very much a new way of fueling vehicles now that you're fueling with electrons versus hydrocarbons. And in many cases, it's a new amenity in the locations where the charging infrastructure is being installed. And so I'd like to point out, even though the industry has been around for 10 years, we're still finding in many cases as properties install chargers, you know, whether there's those three main categories, there's the home, workplace, and then when you're on the go. In many cases, when the charging infrastructure is being installed, it's being installed for the first time. And so the property manager, owner is new to this whole category. And so there's still a lot of education that we see that's required for them to understand that it's important for them to install charging infrastructure today and to educate them on ways they can control access, they can cover the cost of electricity, they can help manage the load on the grid. And so I would say that's throughout the various, segments of, single family home, yes, but also multifamily. Workplace would be the real estate folks in addition to the corporations. And then on the go would be the public retail locations. So I'd really endorse, in terms of a community, that we all continue to work together on really educating the world on this new way of fueling vehicles. So again, appreciate the opportunity. With that, I'll hand it back to you, Giovanni.
Mark, thank you. Thank you. And actually, indeed, you're right. So just to comment very, very quickly, in some cases, we have seen as well, the first time we have popped up, in our jurisdiction was a little bit more difficult. And then over time, the people, the main components, and it's getting better and better. Mark, I'm going back to you later. Of course, I go to Lori. Lori, you've heard. Of course, you can absolutely, based on the experience that you have, I believe your perspective is crucial, important from all of us. So still, let's stay focused on the barriers, and we want to listen from you, of course. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Giovanni, and hello to everyone. It's an honor to be with all of you, and certainly great to be part of this community. I think the barriers, I think Giovanni articulated the barriers well. We've got, a tremendous amount of support to build infrastructure, both at the utility level as well as with companies like Giovanni's or EVgo, as an example. But we're challenged by all of the interest and excitement, and I would like to say, like, almost getting out of our way of each other, collectively working together, but then really finding a way to accelerate this build out. We still have permitting challenges, and I expect that both in California and nationally, we're going to really find our way forward. But those certainly have been barriers. We've had barriers to kind of environmental studies that need to occur. So really that whole ecosystem around any other infrastructure that you'd be putting in the ground exists in this space as well. And then for us, I really think it's about partnerships, right? It's about really understanding where infrastructure needs are and collectively working together to ensure that we are choosing locations that are going to maximize adoption and provide flexible charging for customers. And so, whether it's utility owned, whether it's utility built, whether it is in partnership, I think there is this really amazing opportunity for us to continue to work together. But the challenges from an agency standpoint in permitting, still exist, and we have to continue to work through that. And I think we work through it by collectively working together. From a utility standpoint, I would still say one of our challenges is ensuring that we are working in close partnership with charging infrastructure partners, because what is needed most is capacity on our grids. And so our capacity planning has a long cycle time. And what we have been finding is that we have a mismatch with where charging infrastructure needs to go versus where maybe as a utility we were planning to make infrastructure investments, say for wildfire hardening in California or other types of infrastructure. And so this notion of partnership becomes really critical so that we can be looking long and looking short to ensure that we are able to meet the demands of where infrastructure needs to go. And so, we as utilities can actually be a barrier to that, in support of, companies like Electrify America and EVgo, et cetera. So I think this continued partnership is really what's going to win the day, and ensuring that, as Giovanni said, our partnership has allowed us to really learn a lot from each other. But there's been times when PG&E hasn't been able to get the permitting done, and Electrify America then takes the lead in getting the permitting done. So it's really dancing together, if you will, in order to really build this incredible ecosystem.
Yeah, no, Lori, absolutely. And let me say, in some cases, also the other way around, where actually we were not able to help us to make it happen. So I must give it back to you and to your team for that. Hey, Lori, thank you very much. You are raising a very important topic, which is grid management, grid resiliency, grid stability. I'm going to go back to you guys in a couple of seconds, but before we want to listen from Corey. Of course, Corey, Flo, you guys are doing a great job. Of course, from your side, you're growing up very nicely. And I want to listen from you based on your company experience. Please, share with us your biggest headaches that you had on your side.
Thanks for that, Giovanni. Absolutely happy to. I would say right now, so often we as an entire community are very often focused on how are we deploying chargers, right? It's all about quantity, get the chargers in the ground. But for us at Flow, that really only represents the first half of the conversation. The second half for us is all about quality of that infrastructure, which we at Flow define as reliability. How reliable is it? How well maintained is it? And so that's in particular what I'd like to focus on, just because we don't think it gets enough attention or discussion, at least externally. We've read the reports, we've heard the anecdotes, we've seen the surveys from driver groups like Plug in America and what have you, just about there being broken chargers in the wild. They're either broken because of hardware reasons or software reasons, and we think there's enough of that popping up across the country, or really across the continent, if we're talking about North America, that it does create a consumer perception issue about the reliability of EVs, EV charging. Is this the right technology for me? Might I get stranded because a charger's not working when I need to pull up to it? So you're kind of getting this multiplier effect of range anxiety. Do the chargers exist? But now we've got charger anxiety following up on it, which is, okay, I found my charger, but is it working when I drive up to it? So I think right now, especially in California, no one really has a holistic understanding of the reliability of all of our charging stations that are funded by the state or by the ratepayers or perhaps by another public entity. So I think there's certainly more work to be done to understanding the overall health of our network, writ large for everyone. But also understanding, are there differences in reliability between regions, between communities, between networks? Because certainly no one should be suffering from a disproportionate level of access to reliable charging stations as well. So that's a much broader community issue that I certainly want to point out, which is not just first understanding what is the overall health or quality or reliability of our network, but then what can we do to improve that, so that way consumers don't feel like chargers or EVs aren't the right technology for them. How do we create a positive consumer experience? And then ultimately, from the state's perspective or from the ratepayers' perspective, ensuring high reliability translates into a return on investment. Broken chargers are not providing value to the state for the dollars that they're putting up, and they're certainly not providing a public benefit to consumers.
Of course, I was on mute. I'm sorry. So, Corey, yeah, thank you. Of course, I believe everyone agrees. Reliability, it's really the main topic at the end of the day. Without it, the magic does not happen, and we do not instill that confidence for customers to use and to buy EVs. So it's really component. I believe that's a great segue to Elise as well. Elise is from NLX. NL is one of the biggest utilities worldwide. Of course, as an Italian, I know it very well. But I believe the growth of NL over the last 20 years has been simply impressive. So Elise, happy to guesting and to join us today. Let's go back to the original question. So what is really like what are the main barriers for you guys to deploy your hardware and your charging activities?
Yeah, I think just like everybody else on the panel, I've heard a lot so far of the barriers that we experience. So I've heard, permitting, the length it takes to permit stations. We deal with that too. I've heard from Mark, education, and I would like to spend a little bit more time on this. That's also a barrier that we see across customer
Absolutely.
segments. Cooperation coming from, like the utility perspective, and then availability and reliability. So what it boils down to for us, which especially on the consumer side, what we see a lot is, I would say, sort of like misunderstanding about what EV charging infrastructure is and how it's being used. So the summit is about charging everywhere. I think a lot of what we see is people don't always understand how. And as a community, we need to do a better job at explaining how EV charging stations are charged, not where, but how. I think there is the industry in that, and we see that on a daily basis, sort of suffers from this narrative that needs to be changed a little bit, where we compare ourselves, or we're compared as EV charging infrastructure provider to the way traditional gas stations work. And I think we need to do a better job, and customers, both the consumers that drive EVs and the people like businesses that might be interested in installing charging stations on their properties, need to understand how EV charging actually happens. What we see, for example, we sell a lot of residential charging stations, and what we see is about when we run surveys on a quarterly basis amongst the people who buy our charging stations. Over 50% of them don't even think about how they're going to charge their cars before they buy a car, which means as an industry, we need to do a better job at explaining to people how they're going to charge their car, where they're going to charge their car. The other thing that we see from these surveys is we see about 60% of the people, and these are people who have already purchased cars and already purchased EV charging stations, say that they didn't really understand, they didn't get good information from, for example, from dealers when they buy cars. So I think we need to spend more time explaining to people that most, residential customers are going to charge at home, for example. We need to explain why it's important to then install a level 2 charging station. What is the difference with the level 2, with the level 1? We have a lot on our website. We have blogs, for example, that are visited very often. One of the most visited blog is about how long does it take to charge a car, which essentially links to the narrative that EVs are charged just like gas cars, which they're not. We all know that when you drive an EV, you usually don't wait till your battery is completely depleted, and then you're not frantically looking for, a gas station. And that's the narrative that we hear a lot around EV infrastructure. And I think that's something we need to do. And it goes back to the collaboration. It goes back to making sure we have data to share about availability. It goes back to us being able as an industry to explain to, for example, workplaces, why they need to install charging stations. So I would say the education piece is a big barrier, because we have to fight that narrative, and we have to be able to explain to people that you charge wherever you park, and then you don't wait till your battery is empty. So you're not like frantically looking for charging stations all the time. That's not the EV experience. And I think we need to change that narrative and explain that actually EV charging is much easier than fueling a car. You just do it most of the time, either when your car is parked while you're shopping, or you're dropping your kids off at work, or you exercising at the gym, or you're working. So I think that narrative is very important. And the other thing that somebody picked up upon that I would like also to expand a little bit about is training in general. For what we are finding is access to trained labor force to maintain and install charging stations. I think that's another area where we really, really would benefit as a country to have a lot more training for workforce that can install EV charging stations. And that ties also, there were earlier conversation about equity and making sure that everybody is part of the EV movement and can support EV charging development, infrastructure development.
Elise, thank you. A lot of very important topics, really like seamless UX, of course, access training. Let me just say, absolutely dominant. I totally agree with you, because while we have, as we all know, some nice L2 based curriculum, actually we don't have real nice DC fast charging curriculum. That's also the challenge we have, of course, when we go to market and when we need to go to the field and find qualified service and maintenance, to maintain our dispensers. Absolutely important. Hey, start with the second round, go back to Mark. We are changing shifts a little bit, but equally important. And we are trying to extend right now the discussion. There's been a strong focus on light heavy duty also in our first discussion, as you have seen, but actually the world is changing. And as you have seen also from the work from CARP, from CC, of course, also from Veloz, there is a strong focus on heavy duty as we speak. Heavy duty buses, of course, and also the ability to serve these new use cases with more sophisticated energy services. And now I'm going back, of course, also to the mitigation of the impact on the grid, because of course, there are much higher power levels involved in these cases. So Mark, coming back to you, I wanna know from you, how do you see this, not only as from SemaConnect perspective, if I would say, but as an industry leader, as you guys are, and how this is evolving.
Absolutely, Giovanni. Appreciate the opportunity. So in terms of the focus on heavier duty vehicles and the whole fleet category, we see that this is all emerging right now. That now is the time to really focus, in addition to light duty vehicles, to also really look to electrifying, heavier vehicles and fleet programs. And in our view, it all comes down to the economics of the battery. We've been waiting for the last 10 years for the cost of the battery to come down per kilowatt hour, right? When we started this industry back in 2011, I think it was about $1,000 per kilowatt hour was the price point of the battery. We're now approaching $100 a kilowatt hour. And so that's just tremendous. And so that's very exciting. And so that's going to really enable these heavier vehicles, these fleet programs, because what's key for the heavier vehicles and the fleet programs is economics. It's all about, the cost of the fuel, which now is electricity, and it's the maintenance costs, right? Which, as we're all very familiar, thankfully, electric vehicles are very, very simple, very, very easy to maintain, just a few parts. And so we really see that this whole category is taking off, which is just fantastic. And in terms of more sophisticated energy management programs, we would also say the time is now to really focus on load management programs, on sophisticated V1G, look at V2G down the road. Lori with Pacific Gas and Electric, you folks have been an absolute leader in this space with your demand response programs. And so we very much endorse, encouraging folks that are installing EV infrastructure to install EV infrastructure that's networked or smart, so it can tie in to load management programs, and that also integrates well with other platforms like Pacific Gas and Electric's demand response, platform through that ADR 2.0B protocol. And we see in doing that, it really will smooth the impact as we're going to get more and more demand on the grid, particularly as bigger batteries start tapping from the grid with these greater vehicles. So we see the time is absolutely now, and it's very exciting what's in front of us, across the board, light, medium, and heavy duty. So with that, I'll hand it back to you, Giovanni.
But actually, you had a fantastic segue to Lori. So Lori, please go on. Yeah.
Great, thanks, Mark. So at PG&E, we're not waiting. We have a $230 million infrastructure program that we've launched, and customers are subscribing to it, really to support this medium and light duty, or medium duty, actually, infrastructure. Today, we've got 24 customers to electrify 255 vehicles. We've got a pipeline for 1,100 that we're really focused on. But that said, I still think this is a segment that is not as mature as the light duty vehicles. And so, we want to build it and we want to educate, but we know that this is a segment that is going to continue to mature. We're excited about it. Right now, the growth we see in PG&E's service territory and predominantly throughout California is on the school bus side. So, it's a great opportunity, especially in light of the pandemic, to get as many of these buses electrified. But we are ready to really help support customers. And Mark, I loved how you articulated kind of the demand response. It takes kind of electric charging to a whole nother level, right? So when we really talk about vehicle to grid and how do we really start to look at this in a broader ecosystem, there's huge potential to support the grid and really to support this growth for customers.
Lori, thank you. And Corey, coming to you just to understand how you guys are managing the transition and when do you see heavy duty kicking in widely, and to be addressed from Flow and from the industry?
Well, it's definitely a tough question. And I guess I would say broadly first that I certainly hope that we as a community, at least at this stage right now, or this year, or even the next couple of years, don't necessarily get trapped in this idea of a false choice. Do we put more emphasis on light duty or more emphasis on medium and heavy duty? The reality is we have to push both. It's kind of how we look at the whole EVs and infrastructure chicken and egg issue. You got to fund both simultaneously and kind of keep moving both. I would say, in the California context specifically, if we're going to get pinned down on answers on when do we start seeing a greater shift, I certainly don't think we, as a community in California, should be letting our foot off the hopefully soon to be extinct gas pedal on light duty infrastructure funding until we're at least hitting our public infrastructure goals. So we have our 2025 goal of 250,000 stations, and then there's 200 hydrogen stations. But we know the Energy Commission has calculated much higher numbers than that for 2030 and 2035. And we definitely have our work cut out for us writ large between charging companies, utilities, the state and its agencies and community-based organizations working to get all of that infrastructure out there. So I certainly don't think it's anytime soon in the next few years that we should be shifting away from light duty, given those challenges and really the opportunity in front of us to meet those aggressive goals.
Corey, thank you very much. I understand from Josh that is making me very bad signs, let's say, below the radar, but I understand we need to speed up. So I suggest, of course, Elise, please be so kind to close up from our side, and then, we give it back to Josh.
I'll try to be very, very brief. I think it was Mark saying we need to do all of the above. So at NLX, we do all of the above. All of our charging stations, whether they're commercial, L2, L3, are all smart charging stations. And we work with already like 30, 40 utilities across the US on smart charging programs. So classic, demand response, but using aggregated load from chargers. Specifically, it's very important on the residential side, but on, school bus and public transportation electrification, we also work with public transportation systems. We have, for example, some public school buses and the Massachusetts Bay transportation system where we are offering actually the whole thing. We're offering essentially electrification as a service. So we have the buses, we have the chargers, we have the financing, and we have the energy services that come with it. And I think that's what we're seeing as a trend. Again, it goes back to all working together and making sure that we leverage the benefit of EV charging to not only just work very closely with utilities and make sure they can integrate EV charging and EV load in their grid, but also that it's create that dual decarbonization where they can integrate EVs, but also EVs can absorb a lot more renewables on the grid. And that's really where we see it across, whether it's light duty or heavy duty.
No, and I believe I'm wrapping up, Josh, and giving back to you. Of course, before thanking
perfect.
before thanking the colleagues here, I want to say yes, absolutely. Prioritization is king, and of course, every company should, set up accordingly. But of course, heavy duty buses, they are a key essential component, of course, to try to, close the loop, right? So I'm giving back to, I want to thank, of course, Mark. Thank you, Corey. Thank you, Lori. Thank you, Elise. Thank you very much. Going back, thanks for joining us, and Josh, back to you.
Perfect. Well, thanks again for participating in this panel to each of you, Mark, Lori, Corey, and Elise. And thank you for dealing with our short format kind of approach. And Giovanni, great job moderating and presenting. And you all set up the conversation perfectly for the next discussion, because we're going to talk about medium and heavy duty vehicles and how to electrify them. So thank you so much for your time. And we will move on to the next session.